Thank you for tuning into the European Guanxi Podcast. We bring together young scholars, professionals, and experts to talk about the evolving relations between the European Union and China. To dive deeper into this theme, be sure to catch our new episode every 2 weeks. So welcome to the European Guanxi community. Today we have with us Sebastian Contin Trillo-Figueroa, a Hong Kong-based geopolitics analyst specializing in EU-Asia relations with extensive political, journalistic and academic experience amongst both continents. So first of all, thanks for accepting our invitation, and it is a chance to have you here, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today we will be exploring one of the most pressing issues in global politics, the growing competition over technology. So, Sebastian, you have worked as a consultant for both public and private organizations in Asia and Europe. Thanks to your expertise, we will examine how this competition is playing out between the European Union and China and what it means for the EU strategic autonomy. So maybe let's start with this. What currently interests you most about the relations between Brussels and Beijing, and why should we pay closer attention to their engagement?
Well, I can link your question with why I decided to actually follow from across a viewpoint China-Europe relations. And it was actually out of a mix of passion and opportunity. Because surprisingly, you have just said, Alexia, that is a very relevant topic. There are many different issues where both parties are mingled. Technology, we can discuss about many different things, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors. But surprisingly for me, long ago, I realized that nobody really is following from very close or with a deep interest in Europe. So that's why I decided actually I saw an opportunity as well. So I was liking it. I like Asia. I like China. I was originally, I'm a lawyer by training. Then I decided to join politics, and it's actually in the political field in Europe where I realized, wow, there is ample possibilities here. There is a huge ground because many people are interested about the United States in Europe, But I realized in the political field that both in Brussels, in Spain, I'm Spanish, so working in the Spanish politics and interacting with the European politics, I saw this emptiness, right? This kind of gap. And I thought, wow, I wanted to quit politics. And when I decided to quit politics, I was luckily invited to join a leadership program in this university. And that's when I said, okay, I'm gonna do it. And this is the moment for doing it and for following my dream. So yeah, it's both things, right? Out of passion, when I was having my holidays, I was usually coming to Asia, visiting China, ASEAN countries, and then I thought, wow, there is, and still there are many opportunities in this field because all the focus, and usually all the geopolitical focus is on China-US relations, but the European Union, even though it's not playing a very big role, unfortunately, it should play it, right? Historically, there are, for many different reasons, the European Union should be there. Right now it's not, but it should be. So probably people like you, like yourself, like your friends, your organization, the European Guanxi, people with interest in this field are the ones who are going to help the European Union in the future. Not tomorrow, but this takes time, right? To maybe have a continent, a bloc that is more powerful, that is more geopolitical, because this is something that we are constantly listening, right? We have to become more geopolitical. Yeah, let's just do it, right? You have been saying this for the past 6 years, just move forwards. So yeah, this is related to very much to Sino-European relations, and more specifically, or perhaps to the triangle US, China, Europe. So that's why what interests me most in this relationship, broadly, is something that if you understand how it works, you can understand how global politics work, how international relations work. And then, being European, I also have an interest that the European Union plays a different role in global politics.
I forgot to mention we are here at HKU, where you are professor and guest lecturer, and well, I'm here. I was a student. So now let's explore recent developments in the geopolitics of technology. So rare earths are a group of 17 elements used in everything from electric vehicles and wind turbines to smartphones and defense systems. So the world, including Europe, is heavily dependent on China, which controls around 60% of the global production of rare earth elements. Nearly 90% of rare earth magnets used in European industries are produced in China. So amid escalating trade tensions with Washington, Beijing has tightened export controls on critical raw materials, vital for renewable energy and defense. In response, the European Commission is pushing for a more sovereign European supply chain. By the end of 2025, Brussels aims to finalize a plan to diversify access to key materials like lithium and copper. So from your perspective, how effective has the Critical Raw Materials Act been since its adoption in 2024? And where should Brussels go next to realistically diversify the EU supply chain?
Yeah, well, this is one of the most relevant, probably top three most relevant issues for not only for Europe, but globally, because of the how China was able to monopolize all this area, right? From mining to refining to producing. The Critical Raw Materials Act in 2023 happens to be probably one of the fastest regulations ever in the European Union. It had impressive targets, right? Like we have to have a 10% domestic extraction, 40% processing, 65% dependency cap. But as it happens, as it usually happens in the European Union, there is a lot of ambition, but there is no finance, there are no resources. So there is a mismatch there, right? What's going on currently is that China is 15 years ahead in critical raw materials developments and mining and processing. This means that for catching up, you have a huge gap of 15 years that is not decreasing because of this Critical Raw Materials Act. It's actually expanding. It's growing bigger because from 2023 to 2025, the European Union has done absolutely nothing for solving this issue. So how can you close this gap? With memorandum of understanding, with deals around, we are very nice, very funny. Well, you were mentioning the figures, right? China controls 60% of global extraction. Europe is depending, I don't know if it's 98 or 99% of dependency feedstock on Europe imports 99% of rare earth elements and these critical minerals, right? So if this legislation would actually be as relevant as was announced, and I still remember, and actually I have a big interest in this issue, and I was joining. I'm working on this issue. I'm advising an organization that is related to just critical raw materials and mining, and I'm following from close this topic, and so in touch with the sector, with the realities, right? Not inside the European Commission or Brussels, but with the people that they have to face the daily issues. That nothing has changed. So for opening a mine in Europe, it takes from 10 to 15 years because there are specifically because of the environmental regulations. Right? It's really hard for anybody. From the moment that you think that there is a mineral to the moment that you can exploit it, it takes so long. And it also requires a big investment. Without knowing if you are going to be able, there is also what is called the NIMBY, not in my backyard. Have you heard about this?
No.
Not in my backyard. So many Europeans don't want the mining next to their houses, right? So they say no because it's contaminating. Okay, so we are still in the European mindset. Still, this is dirty, and this means that it's good to sign more partnerships with other countries with resources. You have also to delve deeper, but not only producing beautiful documents, we are going to solve this issue. You have to dirt your hands. Let's put it bluntly and clear, right? China's dominance didn't appear by accident or out of the blue. It's actually a really long-term project that started. There is a famous sentence by Deng Xiaoping who said something like, the Middle East has petrol or gas, China has rare earths. Thinking already maybe over 40 years ago. This is an issue, this is a topic, we have to invest. They had that vision. And then they were investing on something that the West didn't want to invest. So now when you listen Ursula von der Leyen saying, oh, they are now blackmailing us. Okay, this is an industry that you refused and you were doing anything in your hands for opposing it, right? The green agenda was her main policy for the past 5 years. Sorry, for the first term of Ursula von der Leyen 2019-2024. The green agenda, we were obsessed with this green agenda. There will be no combustion engines in 2035. Everybody will drive an electric vehicle. And then you impose tariffs on the cars that are cheaper. So how are you going to force people to buy cars that are 40, 50,000 euro if you forbid the Chinese brands in Europe? So everything is an absolute contradiction, right? What's going on in the European Union mindset? Still, okay, we want this, but you have to show that you really want it. And for that, you have to realize that you are not the only one in the world in charge of saving the green policies. Or that is very sad, but that's the only way forward, right? So what China did is they invested. They were at the very beginning. This is a business that is not profitable. It takes years until the moment that is profitable. So you need a lot of subsidies, right? You need also to think about the environment. But in this industry, these people I meet, they explain you very, very well how it's possible to do it cleaner. But in any case, like I think I remember that for you were mentioning the lithium. For mining lithium, for getting like a few grams, you have to mine like a ton of grounds. So it's really hard to get pure lithium. And this means that it's environmentally damaging. But if anything you require for your digital transition and for your green transition relies on critical raw materials, you are lagging behind. But you are lagging behind 15 years regarding China, who has an absolute monopoly in certain critical raw materials, critical minerals, and you have to move beyond talk and showing magnets in press conferences, and of course do a realistic diversification. This requires agreements with third parties. The European Union is very much focused on this G7 group, where they have created a critical raw materials group for try to scale up and work it up. But probably you have to first acknowledge that your dependency, you can only get rid of it if you get agreements with China. Either you like it or not. There is no choice. So how can you get agreements with the provider that you are permanently insulting? It's something that is unbelievable if you think about. So you depend on this guy, and then you are permanently saying wrong things about him, wrong things about China is, but maybe that's a political line that you can follow, but it's stupid, right? It's self-damaging if you think about. First, diversify, but you also need an agreement with China, not just like in these days. You can appreciate it also, or how this is a very good example regarding the where Europe stands. You have seen in Busan in South Korea now how Donald Trump and Xi Jinping meet, talk about rare earths, get an agreement. Where is Europe there? Europe is not listened. Europe is not attending. Europe is not having a voice. It's not invited, and is suffering the damage. So what is wrong there? What are our leaders doing? Wake up, right? Wake up.
So, as you were mentioning in the start, so I think EU-China relations cannot go without mentioning the US. So the US and China remain locked, as you said, in a fierce competition over semiconductors and advanced manufacturing. This rivalry often forces Europe to binary alignments, as you said. But just last week, as you mentioned, there was the meeting in Busan in South Korea, which was the first meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping since 2019, in-person meeting. The two leaders reached several short-term trade deals, including halving US fentanyl tariffs and China's decision to delay new exports controls on rare earth elements, but no real change in long-term tensions. So where does the European fit in this status quo? Can Europe realistically maintain access to both the US and Chinese markets without getting caught in their rivalry?
Well, technology is critical raw materials also belong, or technology relies on critical raw materials, are interconnected. But technology today is technology sovereignty, is the currency, the contemporary currency of global influence. The position you occupy in the tech scale is what determines the power you have. It's tremendously important. It's the most important thing now. If you look towards Berlaymont, what you see is that Brussels is still perfection in regulations, right? We have the best artificial intelligence regulation. We were 2 years talking about ethical assets and how to protect the consumer rights, and everything is fantastic and super nice. But while you are regulating, the United States and China are mastering innovation and science and evolving. And the European Union has an impressive regulatory achievement, effort. They do very nice. How to regulate online platforms. They get very angry when they find, yes, this is very wrong, what you do to our consumers and to your customers. But if you think about what the European Union is doing, is targeting technologies created abroad, right, by foreign companies, and using data that is processed out of Europe as well. So the European Union excels at writing rules for games it doesn't play. It plays, it doesn't dominate. This is actually, you can infer from my words, it's a criticism of this so-called Brussels effect, right? This was very nice in the industrial age. It was amazing to have this. I'm a lawyer and I'm specialized in European law. I truly believe in that. But the reality today is either you become an innovator or you can't compete. Answering your question, can Europe maintain access to both? Europe has already made a decision, which is relying on the United States, okay? Has subordinated to Washington, feeling that is a better approach, to be safer than to be independent, if we may say, right? So you have with semiconductors, you were mentioning as well. Again, Europe is regulating artificial intelligence extensively, quantum computing, all the different industries that require advanced chips. The sectors that are going to define who leads in global tech. And you have this, let's say, jewel in the European industry, ASML, this Dutch company, which is creating these high-end lithographic machines. So they are doing something unique, and then the United States prohibits to this company or convinces the Dutch government that that company shouldn't sell those machines to China, and also this company shouldn't provide post-sale services. So you have this company who is creating something unique. Is not allowed to make a profit, right? Why? Why the United States applies wrong jurisdiction and European accept it? What would be the other way around? Would the European ever prohibit something to an American company to sell to China or wherever? That would never happen, right? And then you see how the prime minister at the time, Mark Rutte, becomes Secretary General of NATO. Such a coincidence, right? Amazing. There are things that, well, this is part of the story behind, right? The reality is that for determining who is commanding, who commands not only global respect, but who is a superpower. Already 150 years ago, there was a geographer who said, who will control the lands, who will control Eurasia, the lands of Eurasia will control the world. Then there was some modification of this line, and there was an introduction or a reformulation of this theory, and was said, now we have to consider as well the seas, who controls the choke points, who controls the harbors, will control the world. And this is very right still, that you have to control lands and you have to control the seas. But today the United States and China are not competing, are also competing there, but are mostly competing for conquering the cyberspace. Who is going to regulate? Who is going to, who is going to dominate? Who is going to create the last advancement that is going to allow them probably in 2 to 3 decades, is supposed to, many analysts say between 2 to 3 decades, we will know who is the next hegemon, or if the United States still keeps this position, right? But this is taking place somewhere else. This is taking place thanks to technologies. And Europe is not playing that game.
Coming back to ASMR, I wanted to discuss with you the Nexperia case. So just to give a bit of background, although it is not widely known, this Dutch semiconductor manufacturer plays a key role in Europe's industrial supply chains, making chips used in cars or smartphones. So back in 2018, as you may recall, Nexperia was acquired by the Chinese firm Wingtech, while keeping its headquarters in the Netherlands. That ownership initially drew little attention, but with growing national security risk, the situation has evolved now. In December 2024, the US added Wingtech to its entity list, citing risk of sensitive technology transfers to China. And this year, the Dutch government flagged concerns over Chinese CEO Zhang Chuezheng, his management, and the availability of semiconductor products in Europe. So, invoking the Rarely Used Goods Availability Acts, the Dutch state intervened, citing national security threats. The Chinese chairman has been dismissed and replaced by an interim CEO. In response, Beijing tightened control over Nexperia's factories in China while suspending chip exports to Europe. So, my first question on this case would be, what does Nexperia case reveal about Europe's evolving approach to foreign ownership and technology security?
Yes, so this case, Nexperia case, reveals that Europe doesn't have an approach, right? You have the Netherlands that has a compliance mechanism. This is what they have done. Brussels is not operating independent tech or a security policy. What we're witnessing again is American long-arm jurisdiction. They're making the decisions for the European, and these decisions are not necessarily good for the European single market, and for reasons that we will discuss. So you were mentioning this 1952 Cold War relic, right? They are
Reviving.
picking from the shelves, removing the dust, and within a single day, miracle, within a single day after the United States say, you have to fire that CEO and seize the company, wow, they do it, surprisingly. So you have these Dutch officials claiming, we have acted without consultation with any country whatsoever. It was pretty synchronized, right? So the synchronization was so precise that it would be impressive if it weren't pathetic. It's pathetic, right? That you're just following what other power says, even if it's the United States. So this, now we know it wasn't about security, about national security. Nexperia makes legacy chips for dishwashers and cars, not for missiles and weapons. It doesn't make any sense. The real issue was ownership. The United States can't stand that Chinese capital are investing in Europe, and European workers are working for a company that is the main branch is Chinese. So Washington is treating now semiconductors as a strategic monopoly, which is outstanding, right? And the pattern repeats. You were mentioning again ASML, right? ASML was blocked for selling the EUV machines to China under American pressure. We know that loyalty to Washington is rewarded. We know it today, but not for every one of us, right? Only for the prime ministers. You have now Mark Rutte's successor, Dick Schoof. Do I say it well? Dick Schoof. So he was the former. Sorry?
I don't speak Dutch.
They do. So this prime minister is the successor of Mark Rutte. He's the former head of the Dutch intelligence. He was also a minister with Mark Rutte. Well, he has continued the same alignment. So there is a mindset there, right? In the Netherlands. It's not only the Netherlands. It's a very, very widespread mindset about following American instructions. And we have seen it with the tambourine, with the Scotland deal, right? And with the 5% of GDP to NATO. So the comedy somehow is how little effort goes to disguise all this, right? It takes less than 24 hours from the moment the United States are enacting a new rule to fire this guy, because otherwise they threaten that you are going to be sanctioned. Well, you can appreciate in these kind of cases how the European Union lacks discretion anymore. They have submitted. The United States dictates right now, not only like in the case of ASML, what the European can produce, but now also who can produce in your soil, which is outstanding because there are many Chinese companies operating or listed in the US stock markets. Why not the European, right? Doesn't make any sense. Now this is affecting the automotive industry. You have the German association, the General Association, complaining that this is affecting, that some companies already have to stop factories and production lines. And then came the punchline, right? A few days ago in Busan, suddenly Trump says, only a tiny Trump comment, he says, now this rule, we reject this rule. We suspend the entity list rule, and then now it's not operating because we have a deal with China for also stopping the prohibition of exporting rare earths for a year. So suddenly you realize that the Netherlands are in the most awkward position, right? Well, so if the rule can be suspended this casually, what this means? What does this say about the gravity, the security threat that it was claiming to counter? Was it that relevant? Because it seems to be very easy. Like, this is not relevant anymore. It was very relevant September 30th, but October 30th, 1 month after, is not that relevant anymore. But the Netherlands now is maintaining a censure over a company whose legal rationale has evaporated. What are the Netherlands going to do? It's very sad, but it is simultaneously okay. Now this is the test for you. What are you going to do? Because China obviously is waiting. What are you going to do now? The consequences go far beyond, because if you think about the questions that Chinese companies are posing to themselves in the boardrooms, they are thinking, okay, why do we have to engage with a bloc that don't apply rules anymore, or the legal security is not standing, it's not safe to invest in Europe now because maybe the United States put your industry in an entity list. And I understand that can affect me in the US, but it's affecting me also in Europe, right? So what happens when the new blacklist defines the sectors that can operate in Europe? All the sectors are at risk somehow. So in this case, if European chips, European semiconductor industry, its future relies on Dutch equipment, on Chinese scale, and on American authorization or permissions, one of these links fails and your sector is evaporated, doesn't exist. You can't even produce cars. So this is a case that is paradoxical because it seems like something small, it's making some headlines, but not very much neither. If you scratch a bit the analysis in Europe, you will not run in these kind of questions, and they are not even wondering what's going on in China. They know that, okay, the parent company now has an issue where they're focusing on the secondary things. The relevant things are these questions. How a sovereign country belonging to an organization that is powerful with 27 members is just in less than 24 hours following an instruction that is affecting the whole automotive industry in Europe. It's remarkable, right?
So my following question would be, how might growing concerns over Chinese investments impact European industries, notably, as you mentioned, the automotive industry in Europe?
Again, the European electric vehicles industry. If 70% of the batteries are constructed, are built in China, and then you are trying to, raising the tariffs to the Chinese electric vehicles, and you are creating a company, Normal, that fails, that bankrupts, and then you have this Nexperia problem, and China retaliates and prohibits that because as far as I know, what they do in the Netherlands is some production, but it's mostly design. But in China, producing is cheaper, so they produce most of the chips in China. But then China says, I'm not going to send you these chips. So it's started to affect the biggest automotive companies and some others in the European Union. So production lines can halt. So, all together with this phase out of phasing out combustion engines by 2035, by raising the tariffs, what do the European Union want the automotive market to be? You know, if you are, this is a usual reaction now in the European Union that is happening too often. It's always reactive, right? It's not thinking about how do we make our market better in the case of the automotive. We are talking about the effects of the Nexperia case. But if you delve a bit deeper, you realize that why everything is reactive, like these tariffs to the electric vehicles, to the Chinese electric vehicles. How do the European Union leaders want the automotive European sector to compete in the world globally if it's much more expensive than other cars? You still can have markets where your cars can be interesting, but what you are doing is reactive, meaning that you are focusing on how to protect your markets. It's a protectionist measure, and this is never something good. Because not because it's bad by itself, because it's hiding something behind, right? And what you are hiding is that you are not boosting that this industry evolves and competes globally. What you are doing is reactive. So again, we are talking about technology because this is related to technology. Electric vehicles are the batteries. We are talking again about critical raw materials because 10 kilos of these batteries are usually rare earths, more or less 10 kilos. And this shows the importance of the critical raw materials, of the green industry, of the development of the technology. Everything is interlinked, right? And according to my research and my understanding, the European Union is not doing enough for competing, for boosting your industries. We are actually having amazing competition rules in Europe that are hyper protective of the consumers. And they had a sense for the, let's say, for the past, even you can say the past century, the 20th century, they don't make sense anymore. You need national champions. You need European champions. You need agreements with the guys who have the critical raw materials. You need certain things that don't arrive. So you need to focus on real financial instruments that make your technology better. You need national champions, and you have to think about the power of saying no occasionally to the United States.
And back to what you were mentioning about the US pressure, recent released court filings showed that the US government had announced to Dutch authorities that if the Chinese CEO was kept into the firm, then there would be sanctions on Nexperia.
Yes.
So how much pressure do you think the US put on Dutch government? Because of course there was some national security risk, but there was also shortcomings in governance from the Chinese CEO. So how would you scale the US pressure on this decision?
Well, the pressure is usually outstanding. It's so hard. You can appreciate it with any occasion when any European member state in NATO tries to buy weapons. So if you don't buy the American, they are going to pressure you, and they are going to say, "Hey, my industry is better," and it is. It's the first industry in the world. My industry is better. Buy my things. If you do some procurement and it's not going to be to finish in American hands, in one of the big American, they are going to complain. They are going to harass your government, and finally, if you don't comply, they will do press statements. They will go public until you do what they want. This everybody knows. This happens. 2/3 of the European weapons are bought to American companies. 2/3. So that's what's behind the 5%. In this case, what is Washington winning, right? This is mostly your question. What is Washington winning here? Well, we know that they are not winning anything because it's a rule that has had a life of 28 days. Was it that important? And then you have this pitiful behavior by the Dutch government, which is not making a decision, it's executing instructions. Think about it. If I'm Dutch, I'm going to be very angry today with my government, right? So, and they say, we are doing this without any consultation with any other power, any other country whatsoever. But the coincidence shows that they were firing the sales in the company and firing this guy who apparently has a criminal record. I mean, I don't know the guy. I'm never going to defend anybody that I don't know. So that's another story. How many people have had criminal records and are running companies around, right? So in the end, you think it's because of national security. You know, when everything is national security, nothing is national security. Today it's impossible to understand what is national security anymore because everything is national security. Why the chips that go to cars and dishwashers and equipment for households are now a national security issue? And this national security issue is not a national security issue 25 days after. What is this joke? Right? So, the choreography is too precise. The synchronization is too tight. So what you have is that a European government is executing American instructions. If you do that, there are two possible reasons. The first one, and that we can consider that's what's happening usually in these contexts, is that the pressure is enormous. The other one that we know also is that when you comply, you are rewarded. And this is very harsh.
So now let's turn to the future of EU-China relations. So as you may all recall, in its 2019 strategic outlook, the European Union described China as a cooperation partner, an economic competitor, and a systemic rival. 6 years later, the EU's position toward China has become more cautious, balancing openness with the need for more sovereignty. So how can the EU maintain its coordinated and coherent approach to economic security and technology policy across all member states, given their different levels of dependence on China? And I remember reading you in an article explaining how different approaches member states have towards China.
Well, you are too nice formulating the question this way, because the reality is that the European Union doesn't have a coordinated approach, doesn't even have a China policy. So the European Union, not only there are different visions or positions about where every country or every government has a different China stance or different China approach, also the European Union lacks today a proper China policy. We know very well what the American policy is. It's following anything they ask for. We don't know what the European Union wants from China. And you only have to follow the last speeches by Ursula von der Leyen, the speeches, the State of the Union that she delivers every year, where she's formulating policy and she's expressing her opinion about something that is going to happen. If you follow what she has been saying for the past 6 years on China, it's like flashy declarations, very interesting remarks for the media but she contradicts herself to the extent that in 2025, in the last State of the Union, she didn't mention China. So the European Union doesn't have a China policy. The 2019 strategic outlook was incoherent from the very beginning. Okay, it was attempting to reconcile. You were mentioning the different references, right? Partner, competitor, rival. Okay, was trying to reconcile moral posturing with economic dependence and geopolitical caution, but what was doing in reality was exposing contradictions, because what is more relevant for us? That is a partner, that is a competitor, or that is a rival? What is important for the European? So Brussels is defining altogether a country for the first time. There are other China papers, but China is the only country that has a proper European definition. Not even Russia has a European definition. I mean, there are many things I thought, especially within NATO, but the reality is that being a systemic rival, promoting alternative governance models, what does it mean, right? Any autocracy in the world has a different system. It's obviously, maybe it's not promoting, but it's supporting a different system, an autocratic system. How many autocracies are there globally? Why only China is singled out, right? So only once the European Union tries to define China, and if you think about, can even sound like balanced, like, oh, nice. So yeah, of course, because it's China's rise was bringing many other powers to rethink or to reset the expectations. But the reality is that we don't know what role takes precedence. Partner, competitor, or rival? What is more relevant? What is more important? What is the guide for your member states? Where do they have to focus? How do they interact, these three definitions? Right? When cooperation conflicts with rivalry, which one wins? How do we apply this now? So since 2019, nobody has explained. You have everybody saying around, we are partners, competitors, and rivals. But again, systemic rivalry is a reactive posture. Okay? Once again, driven by securitized narratives, by external pressure. This document is approved right after, in 2017, the United States approved their national security strategy. And they define China and Russia altogether as challengers, as no systemic rival. This is a European invention. That sounds nicely. But the reality is that once again, the US is acting making a decision. Oh, and then the European Union is realizing something. They were opening our eyes on something, right? So the key question, Alexia, the key question that nobody is able to answer in Brussels is, why did China suddenly become a different kind of actor in 2019 regarding 1975? Or 2001, when the European Union was helping China to join the WTO. The regime is the same. The Communist Party governing China hasn't changed. China began exporting more to the European Union rather than the opposite, than the European Union to China in 2002. So it took 17 years for understanding that it's a systemic rival. Please explain me. Can someone make sense of this? Can Europe make a decision? This is also something that, from a diplomatic perspective, you can think, is that wise to describe people or to position yourself publicly? But you have decided to do it. So now how do you backpedal here? Today, we are governed or ruled by a system where there is what I describe as orbital bipolarity. There are the US and China, both are the anchors, and all the rest, including the European Union, are orbiting around them and making decisions. Okay, I join the US on this, I join China on that. Also the European Union. The European Union is doing that. I rely on the US for security and rely on China for trade. If you can simplify, okay? It's a simplification in the end, but for making the idea more visible. The European Union today is not the third superpower that was advanced by Emmanuel Macron in 2017, when he talks about strategic autonomy for the first time and says the European Union has to be a balancer. He's the only one who has said something, even if he can't accomplish anything. He's the only one with some vision, right? So he had that vision, 2017, 2025, 8 years. And how are we? When he talked about strategic autonomy, he was thinking about the US, by the way, not about China. How is the European Union today in comparison to 2017? Better or worse than then? If you don't want to answer, I do. Worse, much worse. Less powerful.
I think the Nexperia saga shows how new technology and national security are deeply intertwined for the EU. Mm-hmm. But I also think it shows how, for the EU, there's a lot of challenges to be more competitive, but also to protect its strategic industries and for them to be more reliant. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how things evolve in the next years, but thank you for accepting our invitation to European Guanxi and for sharing your expertise on this topic.
My pleasure. I'm sorry to... I think I have to be honest and speak the truth, even if it sounds pessimistic. But this is the reality we have to change. Only describing reality, we can change it. Not just clapping and following these leaders anytime they say something that sounds bright or new, or they have to do what they have to do. And the only way is to be very critical of them. This is actually how the system works. If we talk about European values, Alexia, the reality is that a democracy requires a government and an opposition. What is the opposition in Europe? There is a government everybody knows, with a lot of money, everybody's silent. So only with criticism they will change and they will improve.
Thanks to all of you for listening to this episode. We hope it brought new ideas and insights for you. If you liked it, please make sure to leave a comment and share it with your friends. And we hope to see you soon with the next episode in 2 weeks.